In Learning Objective 5, we learned how to distinguish between a nominal GDP, where I use the current quantities and current prices, with real GDP, where I kept the current quantities but kept the price level fixed. So in effect, what I'm doing is I'm holding the price constant of the goods and seeing how the quantities change. Now that's very informative if I want to know how the quantities have changed. In other words, how my total production has changed. That doesn't mean that we don't care about prices. In fact, we do, and we'll see throughout the semester that we care a lot about how prices change over time, a phenomenon that we call inflation. So in Learning Objective 6, our goal is to understand the concept of a price level, right? So it's easy if I have one good, apples, and the price increases, I know exactly what's happened to the price. But if I have several goods and prices of some go up, prices of others stay the same or go down, how do I determine what has happened to the overall prices in the economy? Our way to handle that is the price level. And before we get into the details, the intuition is very similar to what we did with real GDP. With real GDP, we kept the price fixed and let the quantities change. Then I knew what happened to quantities. With the price level, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to keep the quantities fixed and let the price change. And that way we have a sense of what exactly happened to the prices in our economy. So the reason we care about this is that, one of the important questions that you'll face throughout your lifetime, right, is managing the cost of living and how this has changed. So in a sense, I don't in particular care what number's on my paycheck, right? The specific number doesn't matter. What really matters to me is what I can buy with that paycheck. And that depends on the price level or the cost of living. So we're going to measure the cost of living with a concept that we call the price level. And if I kind of describe the price level, it would really just be a measure of average prices. Or the cost of living. Okay, so we have a couple of different ways that we can measure the price level, or that the price level is measured to measure average prices. One is referred to as the GDP deflator. Now, I have like one semi-decent economics joke, and it's only going to be relevant probably for a few more years. And so my sort of insight is I prefer to call the GDP deflator actually the Brady index. Is another term for it. So if you have no idea what I'm talking about, Google Tom Brady Deflategate. Okay, so if you follow football, Tom Brady was recently in the Super Bowl and part of the winning team. And he is infamous now for a scandal of deflating footballs. And so that actually kind of helps us here, right? So the GDP deflator, in a sense, is like deflating a football. So the GDP deflator, so let me define it first, is going to be equal to, I'm going to take my nominal GDP, and I'm going to divide by my real GDP, and we multiply it by 100. These are always based around 100. And so, the idea really is exactly that. So I have, if I draw my football analogy, so we've got a normal football. It's not a great drawing, I understand. So here's a normal football that's fully inflated. And that would be like my nominal GDP, right? So that includes the quantities and the current prices. And what did we do with real GDP was we kind of took some air out of the football, which was the effect of prices, right? So if I kind of deflate my football, and I'm left with real GDP, what we're trying to measure with the deflator is what was the difference? How much air did I have to take out of the football? And that tells me effectively how much the price change was, right? That's the difference between the two, is what we call the GDP deflator. So let's kind of do an example here. So we have some of our numbers from before. So GDP deflator. So let's take our previous example where we had the T-shirts, the Red Bull, etc. Okay, so in that example, when 2019 was the base year, nominal GDP in 2020 was $7,100. Real GDP in 2020, when 2019 was the base year, was $5,050. So in the real GDP calculation, I kept the prices fixed. So the difference between those two tells me the effect exclusively of prices. So my GDP deflator in 2020 is nominal GDP divided by real GDP times 100. And that is equal to, I think, about 140.6, 140.59 about. And so that gives me a sense of what is the price level. Now, what does it mean, right? So of course you can give me a formula and I can do the calculation. Well, here is an important insight to price levels in general, is that in the base year, the price level, however it's measured, so that is our GDP deflator, it's always equal to 100. So the base year is the initial year of prices, and we're measuring all price levels relative to that base year in terms of 100. So when I see the price level in 2020, price level in 2020 is 140.59, that tells me something. It tells me how much higher prices are on average in 2020 than they were in the base year, 2019. So I can compare to the base year, which in this case was 2019. Okay, so it gives me an immediate sense of how much prices have increased since 2019, quite a bit, right? So about 41% increase in prices between the 2 years. So calculating the GDP deflator is relatively straightforward. I just have to divide two numbers, multiply by 100. What we want to focus on is what this is telling me. And it's telling me how much the average price of goods and services has increased or decreased in my economy between or over a period of time. Okay, so you can check this price level equal to 100. So the GDP deflator in 2019 in the base year, well, in the base year, nominal GDP is real GDP. So if you go back to my example, nominal GDP was 5,000. Since that's the base year, real GDP equals nominal GDP. And my price level, as measured by the GDP deflator, will be equal to 100. Okay, so that's a quick tutorial on, first, what is a price level? Why do I care about it? And then we did a quick calculation for how we can actually calculate the GDP deflator and some understanding of what it tells us, which we'll explore more in some of the future videos.